Hello, everyone. Bonjour. I am Lisa Anna Palmer, CEO of Light Your Leadership, Inc., and author of the best-selling Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership. And today I'm going to share with you part of my journey as I've dealt with imposter syndrome. So I've been experiencing this for years and years. So some of you may have already heard of what imposter syndrome is, and for some of you it might be the first time. All I can say is, for sure, we hear more and more about that. And you know what? I'm going to share some theories on why we're hearing more about it. And most of all, share some tips and tools and strategies that have helped me and have helped many of my clients to slay that imposter syndrome. So hopefully today, the screen sharing will work. If you will bear with me. I just had a little bit of an issue during the testing. So bear with me. In case there are situations where it's not working, we've got a backup plan. Karina and I always have backup plans. So here we go. I'm going to share with you my presentation on imposter syndrome. All right, so hopefully everyone can see that. So imposter syndrome, have you ever asked yourself, who am I to succeed? Or perhaps somebody's told you, you know what, you've done a great job. And in your heart, you feel like, you know what, it's not really me. I just got lucky. Or maybe you're a leader, and you're in charge of a group and a team of people, and, they're all looking to you for direction. And in your head, in your heart, you're feeling, oh my gosh, who am I to lead this team? Well, all of that are symptoms of imposter syndrome. So let me just take you through a couple of different approaches of how to address it. And before that, some tools and some information on to understanding imposter syndrome, because I think that's very much key in terms of being able to address it. So the objective in today's workshop is to help you better understand limiting beliefs and imposter syndromes, and also learn practical tips to deal with it. So imposter syndrome can be confusing. It's a popularized term that embodies a set of limiting beliefs, and they can be very limiting, believe me. So often what happens is this cognitive dissonance where, we feel one way on the inside and act differently on the outside. We can be feeling and acting successful and in charge on the one hand, and on the other hand, feeling like a failure, a fraud, or not in control. There's some history behind this, actually. It was defined in the 1970s and first introduced as imposter phenomenon by psychologists Dr. Pauline Rose Clance and Dr. Suzanne Ament-Imes in Psychotherapy, Theory, Research, and Practice. So it's been a long time since the concept has been identified. And I really love part of their definition because it really brings home how we feel, right? It's used to designate an internal experience of intellectual phoniness, right? So how many times do we go around in our work or in our community and we're trying to do really great things, but on the inside we kind of feel phony? It happens. And you know what? You're not alone. And what I've noticed is in the last couple of years is that maybe I'd say about 2 or 3 years, the term's been used more and more. And this is what's interesting. So while I was writing my book, I was going through major ups and downs and feeling like, who am I to write this book? And, what do I have to say? Who wants to hear what I have to say? All those kinds of thoughts were coming up. And it was around the time where I was just about to finalize the manuscript when I got a call from an organization, and they said, can you come in and talk to our group of entrepreneurs that are working with us? It was kind of like an incubator sort of program. Can you come and talk to us about imposter syndrome? And I said, oh man, how interesting is it that I get called to talk about something which I'm experiencing right now? So let me tell you, one of the things I've realized is that I have a lot of expertise in imposter syndrome because I've experienced it so many times in my life that I know exactly how it feels. And fortunately, I've been able to do a lot of personal development, leadership development, to be able to slay it in a lot of instances and to come this far in my work. So So here's some thoughts regarding why we're hearing more about it now. So it's a shift in consciousness and people have evolved to thinking more about, finding our purpose, following our passions, and all this requires stepping out of our comfort zone. I call it the passion age, right? So it's the age where we're trying to find ourselves, find what it is that we want to do in life, what kind of impacts we want to have. And what that leads us to is, if we want to accomplish those big goals and those big things, well, we have to get out of our comfort zone. And that's exactly when we start to feel like an imposter. There's also been a surge in entrepreneurship and freelancing. By the mid-2020s, will be more than 50%. And actually, I think because of COVID, that's probably accelerated and been a catalyst for people turning to a gig economy, working from home, being entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, freelancers, etc. So again, every time we step away from the traditional employer type of situation, our imposter syndrome shows up. There's also increased pressure, mainstream and social media. So we're always looking at what other people are doing. And you know what? We start to compare. And guess what? We feel like the grass is greener on the other side. Look at all the successful people. And who am I and where am I, etc. So that comparison can lead to an increase in the feelings related to imposter syndrome. In addition, we have increased awareness about the role of mindset and mindfulness on success outcomes. So probably, as you saw, it's been since the 1970s that people talk about imposter syndrome. But you know what? We didn't used to talk about these things. So now, as we talk more about mindfulness, about mental health, etc., it's becoming more mainstream and more acceptable and not as taboo to talk about, you know what? I feel like, I don't know, I'm not the right person for this role, or I feel like I'm not good enough, and all those kinds of thoughts that come up. It's okay to talk about them more. And therefore, we hear about imposter syndrome more often. And that leads to, that increased willingness to share. So that's probably why you're starting to hear about it more and more in the last couple of years. And you know what? You're not alone. We are not alone. Approximately 70% of people experience it at least one time in their life. Okay? So that's most people. And I would even argue and say, and it'd be interesting to see, whenever I present to entrepreneurs on imposter syndrome, or I present to leaders on imposter syndrome, and I ask people, could you put your hand up if you're experiencing this? And you know what? Most of the class puts their hand up. Because again, they're not just, doing their run-of-the-mill work. They're coming up against their comfort zone to push themselves out of it and through it to become leaders and entrepreneurs, etc. And therefore, their feelings of imposter syndrome come in. So we're definitely not alone. In addition, there are different types of imposter syndrome. So the 5 types are the perfectionist, the expert, the natural genius, the soloist, and the superhero. So these were identified by Valerie Young. So it's always fun to work with the idea of archetypes or avatars, because it helps us to really gel like some of the feelings that we're experiencing or some of the situations we find ourselves in. So let's talk about each one just briefly. So the perfectionist. I don't know about you, but analysis paralysis or editing something 10, 15 times is not unusual. And I've actually noticed that in some organizations, perfectionism is really rampant and is a huge bottleneck. Sometimes it's just better to get things done and then go back and cross the I's and the T's later. So it's having that judgment. But someone who is dealing with imposter syndrome might think that everything has to be super perfect. And therefore, the revisions begin. And you know what that does is it really is a form of procrastination. Because as long as we keep reviewing that document, or as long as we keep, practicing that presentation and waiting until it's perfect before putting ourselves out there, we're actually feeling like an imposter, and we're putting off getting out of our comfort zone and achieving what it is that we want. In addition, you got the expert. So, and full disclosure, I think I have symptoms of all of these types, but the expert is someone who wants to know everything about everything before they actually consider themselves worthy enough to speak about it or to present on it or to do work in that area. So they'll take all kinds of seminars, they'll take all kinds of training, they'll invest so much in learning for years and years before they feel ready to be able to speak on a subject. And guess what? They were ready 2-3 years before that, even before some of the training. It's just that it gives that extra measure of comfort, security, and is kind of like a crutch to think about, you know what, before I speak about something, I need to be the ultimate expert. The next one is the natural genius. So this is for people who are quick learners, right? So the person who go along and they'll hear something once and they'll remember it. They'll get up and speak in front of a group without even practicing, and the execution of it will be perfect. So these natural geniuses who are able to do anything and learn quickly until one day, oops, they find themselves in front of a challenge that, they're having a hard time learning. They're maybe faltering and, oh, God forbid, failing at it. And then they want to give up. So think about that. Are you a natural genius? Somebody who's a quick learner, is good at everything. And then you find yourself in front of a challenge that just seems as big as a mountain, and then you just want to give up. So that's a form of imposter syndrome as well. The next one is the soloist. So a lot of us women have that. We have the soloist complex. We want to do everything ourselves without asking help, even if it makes sense. So, when I don't ask for help or don't want to ask for help, I might have more difficulty or challenges doing something, and that erodes away at my confidence, right? So I might think, oh, I could really use help with this, but I'm not going to ask for it because either it makes me look weak or I don't want to impose and bother somebody else. So that's another form or another type of imposter syndrome, is when we think we have to do everything ourselves to be considered good enough. And the fifth one is the superhero. So again, a lot of us, especially moms or women who are caregivers of family members, we think we can do it all, and not only that, we put an immense amount of effort to do everything perfectly, do it well, and come out on top because we want to prove that we are superheroes. We want to fix everyone's problems. And therefore, we never feel quite good enough until we fixed all the problems, until we've been able to do it all ourselves. And that's part of imposter syndrome, because we think we have deficiencies and that we have to go far beyond what is, considered reasonable in order to be able to feel good about what we're doing or how we're living, about our accomplishments. So think about those 5 types. You might be one or have one that's dominant, but maybe you also have, like in my case, tendencies from all 5. So there are 3 key factors that were identified by Dr. Christian Jarrett in the journal The Psychologist about imposter syndrome. So it can be categorized as a feeling that other people have inflated perception of your abilities. So other people telling you you're good, or that you have certain abilities and are calling you an expert or a leader, but inside you're thinking, oh my gosh, if they only knew the real me, they wouldn't feel that way. Or as I mentioned, number 2 kind of fits in with that, a fear that your true abilities will be found out, right? So you're up there making a presentation and then on a certain topic, and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, like what if somebody asks me a question, I don't know how to answer it, or I'm not the expert, or there's 10 other people in this audience who are bigger experts than I am. So that again is another factor affecting us with respect to imposter syndrome. And thirdly, a persistent tendency to attribute successes to external factors, such as luck or disproportionate effort, right? So somebody says, you know what, that article you wrote is fantastic. That really knocked it out of the park. And then you're like, oh, well, I must have just gotten lucky, or it was just the good timing because of what's going on in the media, or, I really worked hard, I put 40 hours into it. That's the only reason why it's good. Taking away anything that might have to do with your natural talents, your abilities, your knowledge, and your expertise. So minimizing what it is that you have to offer when somebody remarks that you're doing well is another factor which comes up when we're talking about imposter syndrome. And ladies, the pain is real. Let me tell you, it's so real. So we worry that we won't live up to expectations. We worry that others will notice we are a fraud and that we won't belong. We worry that we don't belong or are not worthy of being around successful people. How often do you go into a room and think everybody there is more successful than you, and then you want to go like sit in the corner and maybe scarf down some, appetizers at the food table. I've been there, right? So it happens. It happens. And we're good at masking, right? So sometimes on the outside, we look like we're successful, in control, living the life, an expert and a leader, and that's how people are perceiving us. And on the inside, we feel scared, want to fight, we want to flee, we want to freeze, we're stuck. We feel sad and we try to suck it up. We might get angry and seethe and become passive aggressive or resentful. So remember, right? So imposter syndrome is not only about us, it's how we show up, and it also has an impact on others if we don't manage it properly. And it's a terrible feeling. When we look at the last one, we might feel ashamed and like we're not good enough. What a terrible feeling that is, right? It just saps our energy. It's an energy drain. So here I'm going to share a little bit more about my own journey. So you're not alone. You know what? I've built up the courage to be vulnerable over the last few years. And that's part of my healing journey with respect to imposter syndrome. So I wrote a book called Light a Fire in Their Hearts, The Truth About Leadership. And it really is a labor of love because I want to help people have better experiences in the workplace. And I know that leadership is a huge part of that. So this book offers tools, strategies, scenarios, stories, inspiration on how to be great people leaders. So I poured all my heart and soul into it based on my experience in HR and leadership for over 28 years. And, as I was writing this book, I went through ups and downs. I was scared. One moment I was confident. The next minute, I was like wanting to throw the computer out the window. Came close. Thank goodness my husband stopped me a few times. But anyways, all that to say is this is a very concrete example of how imposter syndrome showed up for me. And I think that you might be able to draw some similarities from it, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. That's a big goal. So let's take a look. So the way I like to think about the comfort zone is that it's surrounded by a circle of fear. So as you see here, there's a big circle around a heart. So the heart is me. I like to represent people as hearts. So if it was you, I do the same thing. I draw a heart, right? And then there's a circle of fear around that. And that circle of fear is anything within it makes us feel comfortable, kind of like an old pair of slippers or fuzzy socks. And anything outside of it makes us shake in our boots. And we don't like that feeling in general. So everything we want, ladies, is going to be outside our comfort zone at one point. And that's what the star with the book in it is. Like, so for me, I really wanted to write this book. It's been years, right? I really wanted to write this book. And that was way outside my comfort zone. I had, the first time I thought about it, I hadn't even written a line or let alone have a title or anything like that. It's just, I knew I got a calling to write a book. And if we look at this squiggly green line, so that is the representation of the leap of faith, right? The leap of faith means that I'm right here inside my comfort zone, within my circle of fear, and I need to get my butt out of the comfort zone and out of my circle of fear, past it, and then try to achieve what it is that I want, that big goal, right? So I need to take a leap of faith, which is super scary. That's a super scary part. And guess what happens during this part is that you got it. Imposter syndrome shows up in a big way, right? It shows up. And for me, it was almost a daily occurrence as I was writing my book. I kept asking myself, who am I to write this book? Not only that, I kept looking externally to people who've written books on leadership. And most of them, to be quite honest, were men in their 50s or 60s. And a whole whack of them had been CEOs, except for one or two women, maybe a couple more than that, but just proportionally speaking. So that started playing in my head too, right? Because I had never been a CEO of a big company. But you know what? Then I started talking myself out of it in terms of saying, you know what, I've been a confidant for vice presidents and CEOs for over 28 years, and I've counseled employees, and I have been a leader. I was director in an HR organizational effectiveness group, and then I coached so many leaders. So then I was able, again, so once you figure out what that trigger is, oftentimes it's the ability to talk ourselves back to, a rational kind of place where we're thinking more clearly that, you know what, we can do this. I got this. I can do it. Until the next day when it starts over again, of course. But anyways, that's another story. So over 5 years, I had first this vision that I wanted a book. Then I had to get myself out of my comfort zone, deal with all the imposter syndrome symptoms that come up. And then I finally achieved it. And I thought, yes, finally I did it. And then what happened? So now what? Right? So I achieved it. And then imposter syndrome set in again. First of all, I thought it would feel different, right? I had all these visions of what it would feel like. Not to mention, I launched during a pandemic, so forget the book tours, forget the book signings. I felt like a fraud because I thought sometimes I wasn't good enough. Again, coming back to that idea of what the typical leadership expert was like. And then I was thinking, what if they find out? What if they find out? And I'm like, find out what? That I have 28 years of experience and I've done all this work in leadership and research? Again, just to show you, it's not necessarily founded in rational thinking, this imposter syndrome. So here, for those who are watching, take a moment to do a self-reflection, and we'll get you started, but then maybe you can do some of this on your own. It's a great journaling exercise. So deconstruct and evaluate your triggers and examine when imposter feelings creep up for you. So this is key, because once you're able to identify what the roots of it are, and over time you start to see there's a pattern, then you can start, just like I did, right? Saying, well, of course I can do this because, right? So we start to be able to coach ourselves into continuing to achieve our big goals. So complete the sentence. I feel like an imposter and a fraud when, because, right? So I could say, I feel like an imposter and a fraud when I publish a book because I feel like others who publish books have way more direct experience than I have. And again, just to underline, that's a false belief that I have, right? Because I have 28 years of experience, okay? So, but it's a belief that creeps up. And then you start to notice those patterns over time. So try it out. And, those of you who are watching on Facebook, put it in the comments. And those who've tuned in to the She Did It platform, then please, we can have a discussion about it in a few moments once we're done the presentation. Okay, so again, let's look at some possible triggers, right? So after you've done that self-reflection, here are some common triggers that people have identified. So people have told me during their coaching or during sessions that I've delivered. So the compare and despair is probably one of the worst, right? So I would suggest, rather than comparing ourselves to others, oh, there goes my earring. Let's compare ourselves to where we were like 6 months or a year ago, right? We have such a tendency to compare ourselves against others that we forget the progress that we've made. And we need to recognize ourselves for that progress. So now, rather than comparing myself against, the 50, 60-year-old men who have been CEOs of big corporations who write leadership books, I compare myself against my own trajectory. Where was I, 15 years ago? I was just starting out as a leader. Right, I've come a long way. That's much more constructive. Fears, failure, success, being found out, burnout, right? So that's all founded in fear. So fears are definitely possible triggers. Values about modesty and humility. These are really interesting, and and they shift by culture, by upbringing. It's about understanding the difference between being modest and having humility and putting oneself down. Having humility means, it can mean, I have this calling and it's a big calling and I realize it and I have a responsibility. So I'm going to build up the courage to be vulnerable and put myself out there and take risks instead of saying, I'm not good enough or, I can't do this. You see, that's putting ourselves down. Humility is about realizing our responsibility and engaging with and allowing ourselves to get the heck out of our comfort zones. Okay? Another common trigger, as I mentioned, upbringing, false beliefs, or it could be, don't brag, but it could also be don't rock the boat. Because if you rock the boat, if you stand out too much, maybe it's not safe, right? So again, it comes back to fear. I've been told, oh, no, don't become famous, because if you become famous, then weirdos come out. And meanwhile, in my head, I'm thinking my purpose is not to become famous. It's to put messages out there. So I need to attract attention to them, right? So being able to pull apart these false beliefs is really, really key to understanding your imposter syndrome and also to take the steps you need to get through it. Unmet expectations, right? So I might feel like, I'm going to achieve this. I'm going to feel a certain way. And then when I get there, it's like, it should feel different. I thought that writing a book or starting my own company would feel fun and exciting. And some days it's so hard. And some days I don't know what I'm doing. And I had this expectation that it would feel different. So again, that could be an imposter syndrome trigger. Worrying about others' perceptions and expectations and reactions. Okay, so this ties directly back to the courage to be vulnerable, right? The courage to be vulnerable means that I accept my purpose, my calling. And like I said before in some of my other presentations, the purpose is not just one thing. It's many purposes that we're here for, but they're normally things that we're called to do, and we feel afraid or scared to do them, right? And if we pull back the layers, oftentimes what's at the heart of that is that we're worrying about other people's perceptions and expectations. What are they going to think? They're going to judge, right? Or what are they going to tell me? They're going to tell me I'm, that I'm off the rocker. Who do I think? And I've had people say, who do you think you are to be able to write this? Or, it's never going to be a success, or whatever feelings that others try to put on us. And then again, once you start to pay attention, you notice the patterns, you start to realize that when you're hearing that from people, be it in your family or your close circle of friends, it's because they're speaking through their own fears and they're trying to keep you safe. They're trying to keep you safe. So we need to build that courage and know that we're still safe, even when we succeed. Perfectionism and paralysis analysis. So we talked about that, reviewing stuff over and over again, trying to be perfect. I've done an analysis, but maybe I'm wrong. Those persistent feelings, definitely imposter syndrome. Feeling not good enough, we talked about that. And there may be other influencing factors that are personal to each and every one of us. Okay, so those are possible triggers of imposter syndrome. So now we're going to shift to tips on how to address imposter syndrome, or how to slay it. I like to say it. How to slay imposter syndrome. So first thing is recognizing it and naming it. So that reflection piece that we just did a few minutes ago is a tool that helps us to really understand, what are our triggers and when does it happen, so that we can recognize it and name it and say, that's just imposter syndrome coming up. That means I can do something about it. Realize you're not alone. As I mentioned earlier, 70% of people have felt it at least once. Research to deepen your understanding. Really do some research around imposter syndrome. Today's presentation is just an overview, but really get to understand what it is and then see how it applies to you. Peel back the layers. What's at the heart of it? So in your case, where did it start? Where did it begin? What's behind that imposter syndrome? Another thing to do is to reflect on evidence of your success, right? Because like it or not, a lot of people have immense amount of success. As I mentioned earlier, on the outside, you look like you're living the life, and they can still feel imposter syndrome. So reflect on the evidence of success and say, stop. Let me just stop here a minute. Let me look at what I've accomplished instead of looking at what I lack. And then reframe from ultimate expert to relative expert. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes, and I know a lot of my clients feel this way, and I have to a certain extent, is thinking, when somebody calls you an expert, you're an expert in marketing, or you're an expert in finance, or whatnot. And then you shudder thinking about it. It's like, no, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert. So many more people around the world know much more than I do about this. Well, think about it as you don't have to be the ultimate expert. You just have to be your relative expert. So whichever audience you're serving, so whomever you're being of service to, if you know more than they do about a certain topic or subject, then to them you're an expert and you can help them. So expertise is all about sharing what it is that you know, your talents, etc., so that you can help others. Okay? So if you reframe it that way, it really helps. More tips, mindfulness. So practicing mindfulness is really important. Keep clarifying your why, your passions, and your purpose, because you know what? Those give you strength. Those give you courage. And when we have clear view of, the big goals that we have in life and what we want to accomplish, then even when imposter syndrome comes up, it's no match for your desire to achieve those wonderful goals and objectives. Raise your self-awareness, including strengths and growth areas, and raise your awareness about your repetitive negative thought patterns. Because once you notice them, then you're able to talk yourself out of them. Turn your thoughts around and affirm new and more positive thought patterns. So replace those negative thoughts, not by fighting them, because fighting them just makes them louder, but by embracing them first and understanding this is imposter syndrome, and then saying, okay, well, what do I want instead? What do I want to replace that thought pattern with? And embrace and share your experience, and dare to be authentic. Because when you share and you are authentic, guess what? Other people become more authentic, and all of a sudden you feel like you're surrounded by people who are all on the similar path and journey as human beings. And finally, step into your leadership, because this is a very important part of leadership, is raising our self-awareness and being mindful and able to address these things that would hold us back or be blocks for us if we pretend they're not there. So here's a final self-reflection exercise to shift your thoughts. So regroup and turn your thoughts around. And this is inspired by the work by Byron Katie. So if ever you have a chance, look up Byron Katie on the web. She has excellent information. So how do you turn a thought around? You can ask yourself, where would I be without the thought that I'm an imposter or that I'm not good enough? Right? So reflect on that. Journal on it. Where would I be without the thought that I'm not good enough? Well, probably I'd be, growing by leaps and bounds and working towards my goal, putting all my energy and thoughts into it and not draining my energy by thinking that I'm not good enough. I'd probably have the guts to go and talk to all kinds of people and put myself out there, right? So think about that. Where would you be without the thought? List 3 examples of times when you succeeded because you were good at your work or solving problems. So then you can start and practice. Bring up your own examples. And also you can ask others to give you some examples. Ask them, that time you told me I did a good job, what about it was a good job? How did it help you? Because really, when we are clear on this thing and when we slay that imposter syndrome, then we're able to show up and really, really help, the people that we are dedicated to serving without blocks, Another thing you can do is list a person in your life, your business, who regards you as an expert and why, right? So I'm sure there are people out there who come to you for advice, be it on technology, be it life coaching, be it, on leadership or whatever it is. And they regard you as an expert. So honor that. And it must be because you're helping them in some way. So ask them or think about, what is it that makes you an expert in their eyes? Another thing you could do is build your courage and resilience. So get help from a coach, like myself, of course, or others. Many coaches are very good in this area. And or speak to a mental health professional. So definitely if you're experiencing acute symptoms of imposter syndrome and you're having a hard time getting through it on your own, ask for help, right? Don't be that soloist that we talked about earlier. Ask for help. Read books about leadership and courage. I have a link here of I think there's 37 leadership books that I've read that I really recommend. A lot of them talk about courage, and some of them are even about courage specifically, like Fear Vana is one of them. Another one is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And get inspired by others who have overcome it. So share your stories and listen to other people's stories and be inspired. And I love this quote: who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? And this is by a very wise woman, Marianne Williamson. So think about that. Do you think the butterfly asks itself, who am I to have these beautiful colors? Who am I to fly? Of course not. So go back to your nature and really be yourself, step into your leadership, and you know what? Go and get those goals. You can do it. You have it within you. And I invite you to think about some of the things that I've experienced, that I've shared, and this is how I handle it. Yes, sometimes I might be scared and I feel like a failure, and I need to remind myself, I still got this. Okay, I still got this. I used to say that to myself almost every day when I was writing that book for 5 years. I still got this. So if you want to learn more about some of the work, I do have a chapter on imposter syndrome. Give the gift of leadership if you want to give it to someone else too. My book is Light a Fire in Their Hearts. It's sold at your favorite online bookstores, and I added a link. And I just wanted to add, for those of you today, if you go to that link on my website at lightyourleadership.com by February 17th, that's Wednesday midnight, and register and subscribe to my website, I will send you a free copy of a workbook that's all about slaying imposter syndrome. So thank you. Keep in touch. And once again, sharing my website. If you want to book a discovery call, you can text me at 613-878-0305. It's been an honor to be here. I love the group and the movement that Karine and team are creating with the She Did It movement and Elle a osé. So just the title, She Did It, Elle a osé, is all about us getting through our imposter syndrome and creating amazing things all around the globe as a community of women. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to see if anyone has any questions. Okay. Oh, thank you. I think Karine has put my information there. I think I'm going to take a look at our website or on Facebook and see if anyone has questions. You can ask questions now. I'm looking at the chat. Anyone have any questions? Don't be afraid. This is your chance. Oh, what do we have here? Possible triggers, compare and despair. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think that was Kevin who was able to document a lot of the triggers. Again, try the self-reflection. I feel like an imposter and a fraud when, because, right? And you can also raise your hands if you have any questions. Oh, thank you for the hearts. Thank you. Okay, so I think we can conclude now. Karine, are you still there? Yes. Oh, thank you, Paula. Thank you. Mage Titus, I would love to have you present to leaders. I would love to present to leaders as well. Absolutely. Please get in touch with me. 613-878-0305. Or you can message me. If you're a member of the She Did It group, you can send me a direct message. Thank you. Looking forward to meeting you. Great. Carmen says, great session, Lisa. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. I'm just going to go see here. See, I'm still working two technologies at the same time. I keep thinking, okay, here we go. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions. I think we just conclude, right? Okay. Oh, you read my book. Thank you, Mage. Thank you. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you. Okay. Well, have a great day, everyone. I hope you found that useful. If you're watching the replay, just put hashtag replay. If you have any questions, just plunk them into the comments. Make sure you tag me so that I know that you're asking the question, and I'll be sure to check the feed in the next couple of days and see if I can answer any questions. And as I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to sign up to my website, it's lightyourleadership.com. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to sign up for us to connect. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Karine, for hosting this. Thank you, all the amazing people on Karine's team. And we'll see you, I'm sure, at different events. Okay, take care, everyone.